Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the big budget battle is over. We're going to have an analyst roundtable and see what happened in Harrisburg last week, and then a health care update following that. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, the legislature has gone. Governor Rendell has put his signature on the last of the bills, I think. We'll make sure of that in a moment. Huge fight went on for 16 or 17 days in the Capitol over the budget. I couldn't have two better guests to assess what happened than Fred Anton. He is the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Peter DeCoursey, who is the bureau chief of Capitolwire. First of all, let me say, Peter, great coverage during the debate.
Thank you.
You guys did wonderful work keeping the citizens of the state up to date. Fred, let me start with you. Big budget, $1.4 billion in new spending, 5.3% increase. Conservatives are wrangling about it, not happy about some features of it. What's your overall assessment of what you think this budget did or didn't do for the state?
Well, it's Ed Rendell is a big spender. Ed Rendell said that he's not ashamed to providing for the needs of the populace. This was excessive spending by any standards, but it was lower spending than has been accomplished in recent budgets. I more or less agree with Jeff Piccola. I think
Senator
this was
Piccola
about...
from Dauphin County.
Yes, Senator Piccola voted for the budget, and he issued a statement saying it wasn't good and it wasn't bad, and I agree with him. I think this was about the best that could be done. I think it will be very, very much overspending if the legislature passes either one of the two programs that were left for the fall. And
one is energy.
One is energy, and the other is...
The smoking ban?
No.
You're thinking of the health care, Fred.
Health care.
No,
Health care is a big tax.
Yes, the health care. No, the health care will not be passed. One is the $850 million to be borrowed for the alternative energy.
And there's a huge debate over that.
That's one. And then there's and the other is the Jonas Salk Fund.
The Jonas Salk Fund.
And if neither one of those should be passed, that would be just tremendous overkill.
All right, big picture from Fred. Look, you covered day to day. You were in the trenches following this. How bad was the Civil War inside the legislature? I mean, all that we heard was this was a brutal knockdown, dragged out 16 or 17 days. Give us a flavor of that.
Yeah, it was really very tough because you had two people who, as Governor Rendell and the Senate leaders, Don Pileggi and Joe Scarnati, have said, you had they represented the opposite sides, and they had completely different goals. The way they ended up doing the budget, as Charlie Thompson of the Patriot News described it, was backwards. What they ultimately agreed on was that the Senate leaders said, this is the most we are willing to spend this year, and it's 5.2%, as Fred said. Then, as what they said to Rendell is, here's the legislative portion of the budget, which is a very small portion of the budget. We'll figure out how to spend what we're agreeing to spend here. You figure out how to spend the rest of the budget, which is the 80 or 90%, over there. And so what happened was this debate was conducted on the Senate's terms to the extent that we spent literally 16 days getting to everybody, well, 9 of those days, figuring out what the spending limit was. Then we spent another week figuring out the spending in each of the little boxes in the line items. Yep. And so it was a very odd budget. And so one of the things that I think that's important to notice is each side got what they wanted. Rendell got enough spending to do his new education program, right, to do his other programs, but this is for Ed Rendell to leave $300 million on the table, to not spend $300 million that's sitting in the bank, Fred, have you ever heard of that in Philadelphia or in the state of Pennsylvania? I mean, this is a guy who has a 13-year record as an elected official. He hasn't left $30 million on the table.
Right.
Forget
Collectively
300.
in all of those years.
I think Fred was a little bit underrating how hard it is to rein in Rendell when there's money in the bank.
Very, very hard. And let me make these comments. The worst thing Rendell did was closing down state government and closing down the state parks. The best thing he ever did was opening them up the next day. Either one of those actions was completely discretionary with Ed Rendell, and he would have been blamed, not the legislature, if the state had remained closed.
But he really did.
But he got the deal he wanted. See, what people don't understand is that the legislature never thought he'd do the furloughs. By doing the furloughs for one day, boom.
The reaction around the state was pretty harsh to that in the media. Am I right about that?
Yeah, and it fell on the legislators very hard. And so what happened was, for 3 days since the Friday night before the furloughs, they were kind of closer. They weren't finishing the deal.
Right.
One day of furloughs, they got the handshake deal done, and then on Tuesday, the 17th, one of the big reasons that on Monday and Tuesday, on Monday the House passed the budget was that if they didn't pass it by 11 o'clock that night on Monday the 16th, then there might be more furloughs. And that was a hammer they used to get the budget passed.
We're going inside the details of this budget. If you wanted to know, stay with us. We'll get into it a little more deeply after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society, doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're doing our analysis of the proceedings of the last week in the state capitol, the budget's passed, and a bunch of other big-ticket items. Fred Anton, I want to turn to you. First of all, critics of this budget talk about the long-term debt that gets created in it. Maybe not by the budget itself, but by, the continued talk about floating bonds for the various big-ticket items that the governor wants. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, not enough attention has been given to debt as a source of spending. Governor Rendell portrays debt very frequently as free money. Debt is not free money. Debt is money that has to be paid back. Now, it's of great concern, I think, to all, some of the money that's going into this transportation package, which is going to be borrowed by the Turnpike Commission and which is supposed to be paid back, at least in part, by tolls placed on I-80. Well, there's a lot of question whether I-80 can be tolled or whether those tolls can be used. Jane Orey put out a paper which indicates that the state borrowing during the Rendell administration has risen by 100%. It's doubled during the period.
They did the bonds earlier on for the economic and community development, Growing Greener. Go ahead.
And all those the economic development, in my judgment, was refurbishing every small town in Pennsylvania.
Peter.
Want to just augment what Fred's saying. I think even Fred would agree that Rendell, every time he's proposed borrowing, first tries to raise a tax or create a tax to pay for the borrowing. Then what happens is the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans nix the tax, and then they agree to do the spending without the new revenue. So I think it's not fair to say that Rendell doesn't want to pay for it. It's fair to say that he's not able to get the new taxes he proposes for all of these things like Growing Greener. He's proposed a new tax or a new fee for almost all these things. Then the Republicans turn down the new tax or fee, but then they agree to do most or all of the spending anyway by borrowing.
Yeah,
Would you agree with that, Fred?
I agree with that. And as a matter of fact,
they're working together.
And as a matter of fact, I've said before on this program, All of the legislatures love spending, and they hate to pay for it. And the idea that you're not paying for it immediately through a tax, but are paying for it down the road when you have to pay back the funds that have been borrowed, everybody seems to be willing to go along with that.
Peter, both you and Fred cover the politics of the state. I mean, you're really keen observers of it. Did this pay hike really make a difference? I mean, look, I thought this legislature was going to be very different on the substance of what got done. It seems that Governor Rendell got 80%, you put a percentage, of what he wanted to do with this year's budget. With
80% of what he reasonably could have expected to get done.
That's right.
40% of what he asked for.
Of what he asked for. Okay, okay, good way to put it. Talk about the politics of this in that sense. Pay hike, new members. The Democrats all went along with Governor Rendell. Almost none of the Republicans did. But look at the Senate. The budget was passed with only 2 objections. Republicans, pay hike.
Here's what happened.
Go ahead.
The pay hike made tax hikes for Republicans a dead letter issue. None of Rendell's tax hikes, even ones he argued had a minimal impact, passed. And I think that's because Republican senators and Republican House members thought, I got a pay hike vote I might have to defend. I got these other problems people have with the legislature. There's no way I'm doing a tax hike. So I think that was the biggest effect.
All right, we got about 30 seconds.
The second was that it killed off, is that we saw that the real reform, 2 things reform does. It can thwart things, and it can reduce the power of the entrenched interests. We saw on the tobacco bill, on the anti-smoking ban, a strong ban was killed. That was not a good moment for reform.
Fred.
The political fallout from spending, in addition to the pay raise, in my judgment, was largely responsible for the defeat of Bob Jubileer and Chip Brightbell.
No doubt about it.
And it was also very responsible for the defeat of John Purcell as Speaker.
Okay, we're out of time, but is your point that there looming out there are more problems for people who continue to support de-spending, particularly Republicans who run?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for the great update. All right, it's time for our health care update after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Well, you know, we do a lot of health care segments on Pennsylvania Newsmakers. It's one of the most important part of what we do. Have a little different subject matter, something we've not dealt with before, and I think it's important, and we'll get into it. Joining me is Roderick Craighead. He's the manager of corporate supplier diversity and procurement services at Highmark. Boy, that's a big title, by the way, Roderick. We'll break that down in a minute and find out what you do. And Darlene Jenkins, she's president and CEO of Minority Supplier Diversity Council of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Yes. I got that right. All right, let's, Darlene, let's start with you. Okay. Supplier diversity, we do a lot, you know, we've done a lot, and I think there's a lot of interest in sort of diversity in the workforce. It's been a big issue for at least a decade or so. But on the supplier side, when it comes to kind of businesses that supply products or supply equipment, it's not something we hear much about, is it?
No, it's
You're
not.
going to change that today. Go
Absolutely,
ahead.
absolutely. When you look at the traditional reasoning for supplier diversity, it was created because when you looked at procurement opportunities, many times it was an opportunity that went to large businesses. Corporations such as Highmark realized that there's the other caveat of supplier diversity, which is the small business owners, which make up over 75% of the businesses in the United States. And how do we create the procurement opportunities for these businesses?
Yeah. And over the years, we've done a lot of programs with small business interests trying to get their voice heard. bringing on folks who represent their point of view, particularly on the political side. Let me ask you this question, Roderick. Tell me about what is it how does Highmark, I mean, you're a healthcare insurance organization, you're one of the more substantial insurers, not just in the state, but in the nation in terms of size. What does this mean to your operation?
Sure. Supplier diversity is a win-win situation for Highmark, and a lot of different variables and tangibles. For instance, there's a strong commitment from our board as well as CEO, Dr. Kim Malani, around supplier diversity. What supplier diversity does for us is create economic inclusion. It allows us to reach out to various diverse businesses to help provide services that we need for our organization. In addition to that, it allows Highmark to also reach the different markets that we may not have reached before.
Right.
But in doing so, we're creating viable economic opportunity to these businesses.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me, as a professor is that, we're trying to promote growth in the economy. We know that the engine of growth, and we're not opposed to big business.
Right.
And they're fine and do great. They're an important part.
Right.
But another important part is small business growth, where really the jobs have gotten created. And this seems to me to be an important opportunity to bring folks in who are particularly just getting started, who need some assistance in gaining market share, just to put it in economic terms.
Right.
Go ahead.
And we deal with both the startup businesses, but we also have a portal of what is called certified businesses. So our targeted market is on the private side and also government businesses that are government suppliers. But at the end of the day, we have what I would call the small business segment all the way up to multi-million-dollar businesses.
Right.
And all we are is a conduit to bring these businesses to the opportunities. So we work hand in hand with Highmark so that when procurement opportunities come up, we have businesses that are willing, ready, and able to participate. Right. And it's the relationship and the caveat of that relationship that we work toward.
Now, Roderick, look,
Yes.
you're a nonprofit, but you're in business to make money. I know, John Malani. We've had, many of Highmark's top officials on the program. You want to make money, but you also recognize that this is a way to get quality service provided to you. At the same time, you increase diversity in terms of where you search and look for your business relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Working in conjunction with the Minority Supplier Development Council, PA, New Jersey, and Delaware provides us that opportunity. But what they do also, too, that we enjoy is that they certify the businesses.
Yeah.
So they ensure that rigorous internal controls are in place with these various organizations and businesses. So as we seek to do business with them, we can rely on this affiliation.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break. I want to talk about that and what that means to the quality, which is obviously important to both the person selling and the person receiving. Okay, we'll be back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with another segment of Pennsylvania Newsmakers after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking about supplier diversity. I know it's a subject we've not dealt with. It's a pretty important subject because it really is about enhancing the economy. At the same time, we're providing opportunities for people who might not have had businesses, might not have had an opportunity before. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
All right. Roderick, you were into something at the break that I thought was pretty important. I mean, everybody is going to say, well, you're opening this up. You're going to have all these new suppliers. Can they do the job? And I think you were addressing that when you talked about the certification.
Sure.
Talk a little more about that.
Sure. We rely on the National Minority Supplier Development Council, in particular the affiliations that we're affiliated with, which is Darlene's organization, the Minority Supplier Development Council of PA, New Jersey, Delaware, to go through a rigorous certification process for potential and current diverse suppliers.
Right.
that gives us an assurance that when we're dealing with a diverse supplier, that they are certified, that there's been some internal controls in place to ensure that they are a viable business.
Mm-hmm. Now that's interesting. We don't always have that for other people who are supplying products. Kind of fascinating. You know, if you just went off and bought something from another private concern, you might not even have any kind of, am I right about that? You wouldn't necessarily have a certification. I see what hurdle you're trying to overcome, and I think our viewers clearly understand that. Now, does your organization, I mean, in addition to creating these links with people who buy your services, you obviously have to deal with finding the businesses that can interact with you know, folks like Highmark and other businesses, correct?
Absolutely.
How do you go about doing that?
Well, there's certain things that we do. One is that the council services in itself is a wick to draw in our businesses who are very interested in becoming part of that portal to offer their services to corporations. The other things that we have done is actually work together with our corporate members to understand their needs, their future needs and present needs, to be able to develop suppliers in that capacity to serve them. So we've taken suppliers who have the bandwidth to grow, because I'm a firm believer in that relationship piece, to grow into that area.
So how many are we talking about? Is this like
well, as part of the regional council, my area of coverage is southern New Jersey, Delaware, and I always say...
We like southern New Jersey, by the way. We know why, all the short points, but go ahead.
And Delaware and, you know, toward Pittsburgh is our area of coverage, and we share that area with the Pittsburgh Regional Council also. But right now, when you look at the national organization itself, there's over 11,000 suppliers with the with our regional council.
I would never have guessed that many. I mean, am I right about that? I mean, most people wouldn't, I think.
No, they wouldn't.
And with our council, we have over 375 certified suppliers that are in our local area.
Now, does this cost Highmark any money to do this? I mean, you have to... I mean, you're obviously spending money on this program. I mean, you obviously feel, you know, even though you're a nonprofit, you've got a bottom line. I mean, you still have to, is this...
It's a combination, I think, of a social return on investment and just Highmark's commitment to the community as well. What it does for us is just provides the opportunity for us to first internally educate our organization, our management around supplier diversity, but also to reach out to these various diverse suppliers as well as the organization, try to identify what our internal opportunities are. But we see it as a win-win as far as our resources that are spent to support the organization. Our relationship has been, over 10 years, and we've watched our efforts increase as well.
All right. I want to thank both of you for coming on. Great update on Newsmakers. We're always trying to do something, you know, make sure we're inclusive. We include a lot of different aspects. We'll see you next week for another edition.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay well.